Welcome in. Good evening, Blue Jay families. Thank you all for joining us for the Hop Back In webinar series. My name is Brian Capers, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director for Student Transitions and Family Engagement. My work supports first year, second year, transfer student experiences, as well as family engagement. Tonight, I want to welcome all of our Blue Jay families. This is the first Hop Back In webinar in our series, intended to help students and families return to Hopkins and answer your questions as you and your students prepare for the second year and return back to the Hopkins community. All of the webinars in this series are recorded, and the recording will be posted on our website a few days after tonight's presentation. And so you'll find that recording on the webinar registration page. So tonight's webinar includes representatives from second year experience in off-campus housing. They'll be sharing opportunities available to your student as second year Hopkins students, as well as cover the timeline for preparing students to move off campus at the end of the academic year. There's also a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to ask questions using that feature throughout the webinar. We'll do our best to answer your questions throughout and after the completion of the webinar. If for some reason we're unable to answer your question during this webinar, please feel free to email bluejfamilies@jhu.edu. In the chat, you'll also see that we have provided a list of websites and resources to assist you with future questions, along with emails for the offices represented today. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Emily Dion, Assistant Director of Second Year Experience.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can I just get a thumbs up that we can see screens here? If y'all can see this slide. Cool. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you all for joining us for our first official and first ever Hop Back In webinar series. We're excited to have you. So we are like Brian had said, we have representatives from second year experience and off-campus housing. So my name is Emily Diane. I go by she, her pronouns. I am the assistant director for second year experience at Hopkins. So kind of want to just talk about who we are and what we do specifically for our sophomore students. So what is SYE or second year experience? It is a part of the Office of Student Transitions and Family Engagement. So if you remember all the communication with orientation, with first year mentors, first year experience, in the transition to, we are in that same office, but the second year experience program supports students who are returning back. We know there's a lot of changes and a lot of transitions and can be challenging to come back. So we're here to support our second year Blue Jays and making sure that they have everything that they need to be successful upon returning. So a little background, some of the patterns we had seen with our sophomore students is that there's a gap in how they get welcomed their first year compared to the second year. First year, again, orientation, a week-long onboarding process, a lot of trainings, a first-year mentor who's with them most of the time. There's a lot of guidance and people around to answer questions. And then they are given a lot of information and resource guides to make sure that they have the information to get introduced to Hopkins. But the second year, when you come back, it's like trying to remember everything without that same hands-on guidance. So it felt like a big disconnect for a lot of our students. Another big piece is they're stepping deeper into their major and their academic pathway. So they're struggling with a lot of balance because the course loads get a lot heavier and more intense. And then they're expected to start stepping into research, internships, and have a lot of high expectations and struggling to stay involved on campus, staying involved with friends, sleeping late out hours, like everything like that. And then the biggest piece, because Hopkins we have live on for first 2 years, they're moving off after their second year. They were really overwhelmed with off-campus housing preparation. So negotiating a lease, working with landlords, finding roommates, even just finding apartments to lease, felt really overwhelming. So the SYE program was created as a support, as a soft landing for our second year students to come back to Hopkins with. So that is everything that we do to help. We help with academic enrichment, with leadership and professional development, and that off-campus housing piece. So, talking a little bit about what we do specifically with our program, We start off strong with sophomore September. We have a series of events that happened throughout the month, designed specifically for our second year students to get in community with each other, to get introduced to key staff like myself and Jalitza, and as well as other campus partners, so that they know that when they're coming back to campus, we haven't forgotten about them. So we usually do a kickoff at the beginning where we'll have coffee and breakfast on the way to classes for the first day. We also have handouts and printed calendars about what we're doing for SYE throughout the whole year. And then we also do resource fairs where we have our campus partners across campus come in, and they can get reintroduced to different opportunities that they might have forgotten about from during the time at their first year. So that's a great chance just to have a kind of one-stop shop meeting 20 plus offices that can help and support them. And then we also have a minor fair. This is new for this upcoming year. So if you are a student or if your student specifically is interested in kind of enhancing the major and thinking about even, hey, maybe I want to double or triple major, but the academic plan to do so is really rigorous and it might not be able to get done. A minor is a really great way to enhance the resume without overwhelming the schedule. So we are having our academic departments and our deans coming in to talk about why minors might be a benefit. So that's a new program we're doing this year. And then we do a series of lunch and learns. So those are panel workshops where students come in, they get lunch, and we have a different topic that we're covering that day. We have one that covers managing stress and building balance in your life. So with our counseling center, with health promotion and wellness, with recreation, we're having that group talk about how to build balance in a new structured schedule and one that has a higher course load. The next one we're doing is boosting your resume. So if you're a student or if you are a student interested in study abroad, research, internships, or like entrepreneur with the Pava Center, then this is a really great one to go to just to learn about how you can take what you're learning in the classroom and articulate it in a resume and take those experiences to build that out even more. And then the last one we do is moving off campus. So this is with financial aid, dining, and our off-campus housing partners who are here today. So we talk about what students should be doing from the beginning of the year to make sure that they're set up, and the timeline and pacing for looking for apartments, looking for housing, and when they should be signing. So those are all of the programs that we're doing in sophomore September. Again, just really a great way to welcome them back in. Remind them that they're not alone as they come back in. Even if they don't have orientation or first year mentors anymore, we still have supports around to make sure that they're staying connected and getting what they need from Hopkins. One continuation with the academic enrichment piece is this year we are offering SYE office hours. So the first and the third Wednesday of every month through the year, we are going to be having office hours from 2 to 4 in the Student Center. Students can stop on in. We're also going to have a Zoom option. So if they can only hop on virtually, then they'll be able to join. And that's really a great just drop off for, hey, I have a question. I don't know where to go. I'm not sure what campus partner to get connected to if I want to learn about pre-med tract or if I need to go learn for tutoring. Like that's a really great place to come just so that they can get all of those questions asked and kind of have like a quick 5-minute chat and then make sure that they know where they need to go because we connect them. So I'll like CC or reach out to those campus partners and make sure that that student is connected with where they need to go. And then another piece that we do is twice a year or twice a semester, we are doing our sophomore study sessions. So that is also in the Student Center. It's for 5 hours. The sessions will have food that we rent out a room in the Student Center, and we make sure that our sophomores have a place that they can go to study because we know study space on campus is a precious commodity. So we want to make sure that they're in community with each other when they're doing it too. So it's not as an isolating activity. So that's an opportunity that happens twice a semester. We also have our academic support team has resources there. So if students are in need of help with the writing center or tutoring, that's a great opportunity to stop in as well. And then once that happens and we're more into the year, we do our sophomore blueprint program. So, sophomore blueprint is throughout the whole year of the second year for Hopkins students. It's an opt-in tier program where qualified events are credited for students who attend certain events or certain programs through the year. These are mainly with our campus offices, so with off-campus housing, with SYE, with health promotion and well-being across the campus. If they attend a certain number, they get a certain reward at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, we have a halfway to graduation celebration called the WOW celebration, and that's where they can collect it. So if they're like, hey, I really only do want to do tier one, if they attend all of the SYE sophomore September events, that's five right there. They're already halfway to completing tier one. And then they get an exclusive SYE pin that we give out. The highest, you can see here on the tier scale, at the highest level, they can receive an honor cord for graduation once it's their graduation season. So that is our Blueprint program. It's a really great way to encourage our students to stay connected and get access to the resources that are really helpful for helping them thinking about their future and their plans while they're still at Hopkins. So that is the second year experience program. If there's any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be sure to answer them at the end. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to our off-campus housing partner, Jalissa.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jalissa Padro. I'm the off-campus housing transition coordinator for about 90% of the year. My sole purpose here at Hopkins is to assist our sophomore students from going from their residence life to off-campus housing and helping them prepare for that transition. Right, so who we are recently renamed. We are now the Off-Campus Housing and Student Community Engagement Office. We work and assist any student that lives off campus at Johns Hopkins. So my position specifically, I help with the transition piece from going from on campus to off campus. We then have a living coordinator. Our living coordinator works with our third year and fourth year students who are then off campus with their workshops. We then have our community student liaison, John, who is in the community. He's at the community association meetings. He is in the neighborhoods, especially Friday and Saturday nights. And then he also runs our tool library. So we have a tool rental program in our library. And then our director, Hana Hassan. So, the second year student and off-campus housing. So, the second year is really special. We're preparing you to move from your on-campus residential life or your dorm to off-campus housing. So, throughout the year, we have multiple touch points where we connect with students to assist them throughout the process. So, starting September of your sophomore year, you will start the first Sunday of every month getting the off-campus housing monthly newsletter that tells you or describes where you should be in the process or where you should be starting. And from time to time, there's little tidbits and tips depending on what we know is happening in the neighborhood. So, for example, if a property is opening up their applications early or on a wait list, you'll find that information in the monthly newsletter. The monthly newsletter also have the events and programs that we have throughout the year. So in the fall, our programs start the last week of September and go all the way until mid-November. And that's with 1 to 2 events happening per week. So we have a housing 101, financial aid workshop, a lease workshop. We do our meet and greet, which is a housing fair. We do row homes and responsibilities, where we talk about tenant advocacy and what it means to live in a house when living in Baltimore. We then participate in family weekend with family transitions, where we also have some of the properties open for tours that weekend. And then we do sneak peek Saturday. And then in December, we will go really in depth of what the process is like in the Baltimore market for our students and our family during that parent webinar that happens in December. And then spring, we do a quick recap. We then do a roommate mixer. We have a social crawl where if you're still looking or haven't made a decision of where you want to live, it's an event where you can stop at all the properties that will be open that day and get to know current students living there and ask their experience, while also the properties create a social atmosphere for everyone. We also do multiple community cleanups in the spring as it gets warmer, it's nice to be outside. And we work specifically with the community associations. We have a virtual housing fair. We have a student property panel where we bring students and properties onto Homewood campus so you can ask your questions of what it's like to live off campus. And then we do our morning perk and housing huddles, which are 15-minute check-ins that we do in the residence halls or in the student center. And then we finish off with living off campus cooking class that we partner with dining as that last prep for before you move off campus. So the housing options, just as a quick overview, more than 80% of Homewood students live within a 1 mile radius of the campus. And students either live in row homes, so these are individual houses. These could be multifamily or single family houses that are in the Charles Village, Able neighborhood is where we see a lot of our students. Commercial, so we have over 20 commercial properties. These are the large high-rise apartments that we see on North Campus and east of the campus where many of our students live. And these are buildings that we have relationships with, so we can communicate and liaise and help in that application process at these commercial properties. And then we have some students who live in condos. There's two condo associations around the campus that we see a lot of students renting. And renting in a condo is similar to renting in a row home when it comes to responsibilities. And then we have a monthly newsletter and our social media that has a lot of information of free or low cost events for Hopkins students that we promote to students to have them kind of explore Baltimore and be part of the grander Baltimore community. So our service and support in general, because it's not just about that transition, but also what we do after you've moved off campus. So we have educational workshops and info sessions. We do the housing fairs. We do one-on-ones. So those one-on-ones can be scheduled virtually, walk-in, or by appointment. We have our lawn maintenance equipment rental program for our students that live in the row homes. At the end of the year near graduation, we do a bulk trash pickup program. Then we also have our Good Neighbor program run by John. John, also a former Baltimore police officer, does a security assessments for row homes. So if your student or if you would like to live in a row home and you don't necessarily want to go see the row home by yourself, or you don't necessarily know what you're looking for when it comes to safety and security in living in a home, John will meet you at the house, go with you, meet the property manager with you, and then he'll write a security assessment of that home and give a copy to you, and then also give a copy to the property manager if anything needs to be, if any maintenance is needed or if there's an issue that he finds. We also do personal safety workshops and community events through our office. Right, to contact us or to find us, we are now in Homewood Apartments with the Hopkins Square entrance on Charles Street, and this is the email to be able to contact us. Also, with the map here, this is the blue dotted line is the safety and security patrol line for Johns Hopkins University. So within the safety security patrol line, we have the Allied Wolf Services, we have JHU Public Safety, and we do have JHU or JHPD that patrols within and a little bit outside of the borders of this dotted blue line. And as you can see, the red dots represent the 20 plus properties that I talked about before. So many of those properties are within the dotted blue line around the campus.
Awesome. Thank you both, Emily and Jalitza, for the wonderful information. We did get a couple of questions as you both were in discussion. And so I'll start with the questions that came in the order in which they we've received them. And so one of the first questions is related to move-in. And so Emily, if you can take this one, can you speak to when move-in day is and can students move in a day late?
So for returning student move-in, I believe that is the Saturday prior to first day of classes. I can pull it up on the calendar. Give me one sec.
It's no, it's August 29th.
August 29th, perfect. Thank you,
Mhm.
Brian. But what happens too is a lot of our students will come that Sunday, like the day after. They usually just need to go to the front desk of their housing complex, and the keys are distributed there if they don't come for the main check-in, which is usually a centralized move-in.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Emily. And as you were talking about the sophomore blueprint, folks are excited about it. They want to know, do all official campus events qualify for the sophomore blueprint? If not, how will they be able to tell which is which?
Yes, so at the beginning of the year, we send out communication to all second year students about what offices qualify. So our registered student organizations, while doing wonderful work, don't qualify for the sophomore blueprint program. It's really reserved for our campus partners, so off-campus housing, the workshops, and the huddles that Jalitza was talking about are a big part of that. The second year, all of the second year experience events. We have partnerships with recreation and athletics, Pava Center, academic support. So it's like there's a whole list on there I send out. And if there's, and they know that from the beginning. So students will receive that in August. You have it from August until April to submit. And then it will list which offices qualify for the blueprint. If there's any questions when you're like, I attended this thing, I'm not sure if it does count, you would just email me and we would work with you on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. And while I have you, another question. Do folks have to schedule a time for move-in on August 29th?
I believe that there is a time slot that students get. That communication comes from our OCL partners, our on-campus living, sometime during the summer. So I would say continue checking your emails and just make sure that you're filling out the proper forms too, because sometimes they require forms to be filled out prior to move in too, also with your assigned time. And then if there's any questions, we can also put their contact information in the chat as well.
Awesome. And it looks like one of our student workers, Audrey, is also typing a response as well. So,
Perfect.
thank you.
Thank you, Audrey.
Awesome. And so I have a couple of questions for you, Jalissa. You're not left out of the loop. And so when you talked about campus property, right? So when you say we have off-campus property, are they affiliated with JHU? Are they partners or other? Can you kind of speak to that?
So we have relationships with commercial properties in the area. So they're not partnerships. So the commercial properties, the row homes, and the condos, they are all independently or privately owned. Some of them are owned by national companies, management companies. Some of them are private, small landlords. When we say that we assist during the application process, so we don't facilitate any leasing, we assist during the application process. So applying for an apartment for many students is something that they're doing for the very first time. So many of the properties in the area work off of wait lists or they have different timelines. Some of them will let you join a wait list in November, but they won't give you a lease until May. And so our office has all that knowledge on our part, so we're able to answer some of those questions to help navigate through the process. Same thing with guarantors or third-party guarantors, understanding those processes is what our office does. Um, in those situations. Now, when it comes to like independent private landlords, one thing that we do on our end is so we have an off-campus database. That database is for row homes and smaller landlords. And so the difference between the off-campus database for JHU and yet, let's say, using Facebook or Zillow is that we do have a process on our end to verify those landlords. So to be able to advertise to students or to be considered for the database, they have to apply, they have to pay a fee, and then they have to submit their city inspections, their licenses, and then we have to be able to prove that they are the owner or the manager of that house or row home or their multi-family home. When we talk about relationships, so the properties, that 20 properties that we work with, 80% or more of their tenants are JHU affiliates. So because they are JHU affiliates and there are many JHU affiliates in their building, they have an investment and we have an investment to make sure our students are getting what they're paying for. And so, for example, if there's an issue, because students can review and grade their buildings, if we see a consistent issue, then those properties that we see consistent issues in, you won't see them on our database. You won't see them on our blue brochure, and they're not allowed to advertise to students if we see consistent issues. So that's what we mean by relationships, by answering the phone to our office, by having that many student tenants. They understand that as our office has an expectation from them. And so mostly what we liaise with these properties is, let's say someone's heat hasn't worked or water isn't working to the pressure, and you've gone through the proper channels and you're still not getting an answer from that property manager. You can then come to our office and we will get that answer for you from our standpoint.
Awesome. And Jalitza, along those same lines, right? You talked about properties, and there's a couple of questions related to safety, statistics, and where should we direct students? What areas are the best or most safe areas for students to search for housing? Are there statistics on crime in neighborhoods?
So the statistics on crime in the neighborhoods would be held with public safety, or that would be with John Walter, who is the community liaison. When it comes to where many students live, we do see that many of our students, when we do our maps of where students are living, they're living within that blue safety patrol line. In our blue brochure that students get their sophomore year, and they can be found on the first floor of all the residence halls, it does state all of the safety features from all the buildings. So the commercial properties do report to us what safety features they have, if that includes like a double fob entry system, protected elevators, security guards on site, nighttime patrol. All that is in the blue brochure and the literature that students get when they move on campus.
Awesome. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I love the engagement. Thank you all for your questions. They're really insightful. And so, a question for Emily: if a student is studying abroad, in spring of their sophomore year, how should they approach finding off-campus housing for junior year?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I will also kick it to Jalissa as well if I miss anything here. Um, we are still here for our students who are studying abroad. So the resources are not closed off. So this is something where we make sure like off-campus housing will still be a resource that's available to you to attend, especially on a virtual level. I know students who are studying abroad in the spring, they have fall, so they'll try to get a jump on it pretty early when they come into their second year, just to make sure that they understand like what their options are and look at apartments pretty early. Again, like Jalissa said, we have partnerships or we have relationships with some of the housing in the area, so that's a good place to start with the database. And then going from there, also some of the communication can be done virtually as well. But again, I'm going to turn it to Jalitza because I think they'll be able to talk better about like the actual signing piece.
Yeah, so we actually do a lot of our informational series, and it is a full sophomore only informational series in October, leading to our grand housing fair and then a sneak peek Saturday, is our touring weekend for sophomores. So if they were going abroad in the spring, I would say to do all of the information work, the background knowledge work in the fall and actually ask when the property management company, like let's say they like management company that's very popular and does early wait lists. So some properties in the area will open wait lists in November. So they could essentially do the application process in November or December before they leave, and this would be for an August move-in. If they don't have their housing settled by the time that they go abroad, we do work with the Global Studies Office in tandem to connect with all the students while they are abroad to make sure that we can get housing settled before they return. So it's not uncommon for me to be on a Zoom or virtual meeting with students while they are in Spain or Turkey doing those one-on-ones about off-campus housing, even when they are abroad. And most of the commercial properties will allow everything to be done virtually, e-sign, and apply online if it's one of those properties that don't allow wait lists and require them to wait for a actual unit to be open before they apply. But we do receive a list from Global Studies of these are the students that are gone at the moment. Please reach out. They're sophomores. We want to make sure that everyone has housing kind of settled by May before they return.
Awesome. And Jalitza, I'm going to ask you to stay off mute for just a few because we have a couple of questions that just rolled in that are specific to off-campus housing. And so can you speak to the transportation that exists for students? So how do students get to off-campus housing safely after their evening classes?
Yeah, so many students use the on-demand service. So there's two on-demand services that students can utilize after 6 p.m. to get back to their off-campus residence. So one is the Translock app. That is a door-to-door shuttle service that starts on demand after 6 p.m. and goes until 2 a.m. So it is not uncommon for students to use the Translock app to be able to use it as a door-to-door service from their lab or their research or their study group 10 11 p.m. at night. It will pick them up and then it'll take them door to door to their off-campus housing. So we do see that many students utilize that first between 8 a.m. and I might be thinking of the summer hours between 8 a.m. and that 6 p.m. the shuttles work on a scheduled service, and then, except for the Jimmy shuttle, the one that goes all the way to the medical campus has an extended time period. So that is one way that students uh, go from their research or their classes or their study groups to their house. The second one is a Live Safe app. So the Live Safe app is an app where you can on demand request a public safety escort. So I've seen affiliates, staff members, students use the Live Safe app escort, and so they will walk with you from your lab, your class, back to your car, back to your housing if your housing's within a certain radius of the campus. So this is a walking escort. They are not third party provider. They're not Allied Wolf Services. Like this is a Johns Hopkins employed public safety officer who'll be a walking escort. As part of the Live Safe app, there's also a location sharing. So we do see that some students are sharing their locations with their roommates with the Live Safe app. The Live Safe app isn't necessarily like Apple location where like someone can see you 100% of the time. It's more like, hey, I'm walking now. Let me let my roommate or my parent know that I'm about to go on this walk, even though it's maybe a 5 minute walk, 10-minute walk back home. And so you can press the app, it'll let the person know, like, oh, I'm walking from point A to point B, and then you can turn it off when you get to your location. So the LiveSafe app can be used in that way also. And if you wanted to escort or if you were concerned or if it was late at night.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so a question related to a student who is associated with Student Disability Office. Can you speak to the assistance and accommodations that they might receive as, when thinking about like off-campus housing?
I'm not necessarily sure. I know that Student Disability Office specifically has worked with students with their accommodations. We don't necessarily work on the accommodation side unless an accommodation is not being fulfilled. So if accommodation is not being fulfilled that your landlord is supposed to be fulfilling, then we've had students come to our office. Um, with the paperwork and documentation that they have needed something, and then we have a relationship with a nonprofit legal aid service that has assisted students getting those accommodations from the private landlords. But accommodations, I think, enters a legal space, and our office doesn't have legal aid in-house to assist if an accommodation isn't being met.
Awesome, thank you. And we'll post the link for Student Disability Services shortly for you all. They do have housing accommodation, so great question regarding that. And so another question related to move-in is, can students moving in early for other programs have access to movers?
I'm not sure if this is my question or we're talking about moving to the residence hall this fall. But when it comes into moving off campus, we do have students that sign leases that start in May, and they do go directly from the residence hall to moving all of their stuff into their off-campus housing. Because essentially the lease can start when you want it to start. It is a free housing market. There's only three properties that have a set move-in date around this area. The rest of the properties, you decide the lease terms with the property management company of when you want to move in.
Awesome. And so you talked a little bit about leasing, and so there's a comment that talks about like it sounds like it's a little bit hard to lease a place when there's a wait list. Is there enough property for all juniors and seniors to live within a mile of campus?
Yes. So many of the properties in the area, especially when we look at the North Campus, some of them have up to 900 units. They're very large buildings. And so there is housing available. When we discuss wait lists, it's because some properties are more popular than others, or some properties allow a wait list, but they're not asking their current residents when they are staying until 3 to 6 months later. So they'll ask you to join a wait list in November, but they actually don't know how many units will be available in that specific property until March or April. So we do see that some properties create the wait list around that November time, even though they're not actually um, giving any lease offers until March. And that's one or two properties. The rest, their wait lists don't open until January, and there's a 3 month wait on their wait list when they actually know. But they're continuously asking their residents if they're staying or not. It's more about, are they giving timely notification to their property management company if they're staying or releasing or if they're leaving in May.
Awesome. And so when you think about like the infrastructure or the structure of properties, right? And so do the apartments, do they have single efficiency studios? And then outside of that, when you think about like on-campus options, are there any on-campus options for juniors at all?
So, any on-campus options would have to be asked to housing, the on-campus housing office, as we're two completely separate departments. At the moment, housing is only guaranteed for the first and second year as part of the live on requirement, and then sophomores move off campus unless they are in RA currently, or the juniors and seniors who are living in residence life.
Yeah.
And if
Yes, and just to follow up, and to Jalissa's point, there are options. You just have to work with the on-campus housing office to see what can be done.
so, single efficiency studios, we actually have some buildings that are just studios. So there are two or three buildings in the area that are just studios. The whole building is just studios or efficiencies. And those are on St. Paul Street. We see a couple of properties that are just single and efficiencies. In our larger buildings, we do see a lot of studios and efficiencies. More studios than anything else, just because for some students, having that full kitchen is really important. And if you're not familiar with efficiencies, efficiencies have what we call a kitchenette. So it is a very small fridge, like a half-size fridge, and maybe a one-eye or two-eye stovetop, and then no counter space. That and because efficiency is a studio, but smaller. We do have a lot of studios, and then the difference between the studios and the efficiencies. And the one bedroom is the existence of walls. Um, so that we do have many in the area. We have some buildings that are just those.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there properties that students gravitate to a little bit more that are most popular? Can you speak to that?
So there are properties not that just students in general gravitate toward, but more like where we see some of our different populations of students. So many of our undergraduate population is at 9 East 33rd, H Crestmont, because those properties specifically have the residence lifestyle of like a suite style. It's individual leases, so it's a rent by the bed um, leasing format, as well. Those are the furnished all-inclusive options. And then around the North Gate, we see a lot of the graduate students. Some buildings are majority graduate students, and then we have some buildings that are nice mixes. So, for example, the Marylander, Hopkins House, and University West, we see a lot of undergraduates and graduate students in both of those buildings.
Awesome, thank you. And so, can you speak to the time frame for signing a lease?
So, our time frame or our milestones, we have off-campus milestones, and at the top of that monthly newsletter, it kind of states like where we expect students to be in those milestones. But the time frame for signing, we would like students to be signed by April. The timeline changes depending if you want to be in an apartment or in a commercial property, or whether you're looking at a house. So those timelines are a little bit different. So if you're looking at a commercial property, we're asking you to do tours by November. Then we have another touring day that we usually have in February, just to kind of narrow down to three options. Applications should be submitted by January. So we ask that you reach out in January. In January, reach out, ask if they already have a wait list, what the wait list looks like, or if they're willing to accept your application, because some properties, again, will only let you apply 3 to 6 months out. So if they're accepting the application, we say to put in applications in by January. And then if you've put in that application in by January, expect a lease off for March, April. So 6 months before August for some of the buildings, and then 3 months before August. So some buildings that wait until that 3 month deadline, those students got their offers in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you for responding to that. And so, regarding applications, do students have to provide their social security number for application for housing?
If the student is a U.S. citizen, they do have to provide a social security number. If the student is international, many of the properties have their own process for international students of what documentation they need in lieu of a social security number. And we do have a pamphlet that describes the specific documentation per building. And then individual landlords, so in those row homes and condos, some of them have a third party verifier, or I think it's called turbo tenant, that does the verification process. So it's depending on what third party system they use for their verification on what documentation they would ask.
Awesome. And so, can you also speak to just what the typical cost of, an off-campus housing unit would be? Is it equivalent to dorm costs? Should, families expect to pay more? Can you speak to that?
We do our numbers by a two-bedroom unit. So the typical cost is by a two-bedroom unit. The reason why we do it by a two-bedroom unit is because one bedrooms and studios can vary very differently. We have some students that are in one bedrooms and studios that are around $800. We have some students that are in one bedroom studios that are closer to 2000. And that's because there's different that what the properties offer can be vastly different. So we do our general numbers by a two bedroom. So two students sharing a two bedroom, two bath. And for two students sharing a two bedroom, two bath, the typical cost for rent is between $900 and $1,100. Then utility usage would be completely dependent on how much electricity they're using in a unit. And then we do see most of the properties, if not all at this point, require renter's insurance. And then water usage is usually a separated utility in many of the properties. And then food costs. So food cost is completely dependent on your habits. So depending on if you are eating out versus grocery shopping, that can also change the range of your budget when living off campus.
Awesome. And Julissa, you probably are seeing that question that just came in. As you were talking about the costs, does that include utilities for those
No.
units?
So that 900 to 1100 is rent.
Perfect. Thank you. Awesome. I love the engagement. We appreciate you all engaging with us and the wonderful questions. Another one just came in. And so is the rent cost total or is it per person?
So that's per person. So if two students are sharing a two bedroom, two bath, each student is paying between $911 each for rent. Now we do see that some students choose to live in the row homes as in most row homes, students can live up to four students sharing a row home, and then some row homes and homes in the area have gone special ordinances, and that's where we see a lot of our students groups living, where we have houses of five to six students living in homes. But there is an ordinance in Baltimore City that's it's for unrelated people in a home, but if they've gone through a special zoning process, there are some homes and some properties that allow more than four students to live together.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. And can you also speak to just like how much insurance would be um, for off-campus housing?
Rent insurance is can vary. I would recommend bundling. So, if you have a car insurance or other insurance policy, many insurance policies will allow you to add renter's insurance. And when you bundle, the renter's insurance can be between 15 to $22 a month. When we see that students are getting just renter's insurance on their own, it's about $28 a month, around that range.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know you talked a little bit about rent and utilities and internet. I guess the question is, are there properties that include rent, with utilities and internet, or is that typically separate? Like, does rent include utilities or internet, or is it oftentimes separate?
Of the 20 properties, 20 plus properties in the area, there are three that include utilities. And so those three are 90s 33rd, H Crestmont, and the Baltimorean are the three properties that include utilities within the costs.
Awesome. Thank you. Would you be able to give an estimate of an average total with all things included for a two-bedroom unit?
It would be completely dependent on usage. What I have seen come through is we have seen some utility bills for gas and electric as low as $50 in the summer. And then we see an average around $300 in the winter for those gas prices. Now, we have also seen that some students uh, forget to maybe turn or just lower their heat in the winter or have, and during the winter, their heat too high. So we have seen BGE bills in the 500s in the area. So it really is dependent on usage, if you're being energy efficient in your unit, and just like also just being mindful of usage and the size. So a larger apartment is going to take more energy to heat.
Yeah. And I guess similarly along those lines, just for comparative analysis, like how much is rent for a row home per person per month?
We don't have exact numbers like we can with the property management companies because the property management companies give us their numbers in a quarterly basis, while in the row homes it's completely dependent on the individual landlords. We do find that the row homes seem to be a more affordable solution to off-campus housing in general, as they're not at that same price point as the commercial properties.
Awesome. Thank you. I love these questions. Love these questions. All right. Well, it looks like you might have answered all the questions that folks might have for tonight. And so I'd like to just take this time to thank you all. Thank you to our panelists who've been so gracious with their time, and to our Blue Jay families, right, for joining us tonight. And so we appreciate everyone for taking the time to be here. And as a reminder, this recording will be available to you all in a few days on our website in the same location in which you registered for tonight's webinar. Our next Hop Back In webinar will take place July 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and registration is available on our website. And so, having said that, thank you all for joining us and have a great night.